Helen, Debbie, the team, the board, the funders. You all approached this with such intentionality, and for someone like me to be able to get out of Albany for a little bit, to be in community with all of you, my peers, my colleagues, exchange ideas, have some good food, this really means the world to me. So thank you so much, New Deal. So I proudly wear two hats. As Esteban shared, I proudly wear the hat of Mayor-elect, recently elected in the city of Albany, but also as the AI Task Force co-chair. And I have the privilege of serving with two other co-chairs, my dear friend from the great state of New York, Alex Boris, who is an assembly member, but also a congressional candidate, as well as Mayor Matt Mahan. New Deal has been very intentional about ensuring that as local leaders on the ground, we are AI ready and prepared to take on some of the challenges, but also the opportunities that come with AI adoption. The data tells us simply that there is a desire from local leaders to adopt AI technology, whether it is with public works or enhancing the workforce. But the data shows despite this increased desire, the adoption rate is extremely low. And so to address that, New Deal has for at least a year and a half to 2 years been intentional about ensuring that we have AI-specific sessions at our in-person convenings, but also online. And what to expect moving forward by the end of this year, a AI task force report that will be accessible to all of you as New Deal leaders and adjacent. This report is a compilation of case studies from not just on the ground elected leaders, but also some of our colleagues from the public sector and nonprofits. So these case studies give you insight and guidance on how we are using AI to transform our cities and municipalities, but while also making sure that those guardrails are there. So with that, I have the privilege of introducing our next panel. This panel is a tech talk, and it's focused on understanding AI and the future of AI. So with that, I am going to bring up our colleague and friend, Vivek Chilakuri. Thank you.
Great, thank you, everybody. Thank you, Mayor-elect Pliers, and congratulations on the task force report. As she mentioned, my name is Vivek Chilakuri. I lead the Technology and National Security Program at the Center for New American Security, or CNAS, a bipartisan national security think tank here in DC. And no conference today is complete without a panel on AI, and for good reason, because there's not a business, a sector, a discipline, a government agency that's not going to be affected by AI in some way. So we have an excellent panel to help unpack all of this and what it means for your work at a state and local level and what it means for the country. So I'm going to do some brief introductions and invite the panelists up, and then provide maybe a couple minutes in terms of where the technology is to set the stage for this discussion. So first, I'd like to introduce Chris Reith, who is the Chief Revenue and Customer Strategy Officer at Thorium, a workflow platform applying AI to public sector procurement, contracts, budgeting, and legislative analysis. Previously, Chris served for 7 years in the Maryland State Government as Director of the Governor's Office, leading statewide innovation, performance management, and data initiatives. He also worked at Socrata, a startup helping governments build data and outcome-driven performance and analytics. We also have Todd Boyle, who's worked on tech policy for more than 15 years across academia, civil society, and industry, and now leads AI policy at JP Morgan Chase. And before he was at JP Morgan, Todd oversaw tech policy at the Chamber for Progress, an organization I'm sure is familiar to folks here, a center-left tech advocacy group. He's also held several leadership roles at Twitter, Lime, and has served as deputy director of Next Century Cities. We also have Francesca Iofrede, Maryland's first chief innovation officer in a new role within Governor Wes Moore's office. In this role, Francesca leads a team focused on tackling the governor's priorities, from increasing economic mobility to reducing childhood poverty to delivering public services in innovative new ways. In 2023, Francesca founded Breakthrough Strategy Partners, a consulting firm that designs strategies for business, governments, and nonprofits to build thriving communities. And I could go on. There's a lot of other accolades I could add to her and everyone else's introductions. But the last but not least, we have John Bailey, who currently serves as an advisor to Fiore Ventures, a fellow at the Chan Zuckerberg Initiative, and a non-resident senior fellow at the American Enterprise Institute. And across these roles, his work spans healthcare, AI, education, and the future of work. He's held several prominent roles in government, including as Deputy Policy Director of the U.S. Department of Commerce, and a White House domestic policy advisor. So I actually invite all the panelists to come up, and let's give them a round of applause. Great, and before I join them, I thought I would just take a couple of minutes to set the baseline about where we are and where the technology is. And I also want to let everyone know that we're going to have an opportunity for you guys to ask questions. We're sure you have questions, and we'd love to hear them, and we want to preserve at least 10 minutes at the end for you to do so. But just to start, I want you to imagine that this conference was held just 4 years ago, in November of 2021. ChatGPT didn't exist. NVIDIA's market cap was under $1 trillion. Now, last I checked, it's nearly $5 trillion. This is not a long time. This is one presidential term. Today, massive spending from private U.S. companies is propelling extraordinary AI progress. To give this some perspective, this year, U.S. AI companies are expected to spend $320 billion on AI investments. The Manhattan Project, at its peak, spent about $122 billion in real terms. And thanks to these investments, AI models now beat humans across several benchmarks and can complete increasingly diverse and complicated tasks. Just to give you a sense of this in a few ways, when OpenAI released ChatGPT 4 in 2023, it could do an average computer coding and software task that took a human about 5.5 minutes. That's the length of a task it could handle. Fast forward to today, GPT-5 can complete a task that a human would take 2.5 hours, 2 hours and 20 minutes roughly, to complete. So in under 3 years, the window of its ability to perform software engineering tasks has gone up 25-fold. Back in 2023, GPT-4 scored 36% on a sort of benchmark assessing its level to answer PhD questions in physics, math, philosophy. Fast forward under 3 years, it's now scoring 86%. It's why the CEO of Anthropic has called AI data centers countries full of geniuses. And as you guys know, as leaders in state and local communities, these data centers are now sprouting up like mushrooms all over the country. A few years ago, top AI models could process 32,000 tokens. You know, a simple way to think about this is these are like the little Lego bits that AI uses to break down the prompts that you give it and then to generate the content that it provides. Today, under 3 years later, these models can now process 1 million tokens. So 32,000 a few years ago to 1 million today. And practically speaking, what that means is you can drop entire books, entire archives of emails, entire code bases into a single prompt and the AI can handle it. And you should just project these trends going forward. And we could go on, science, image generation, coding, the applications are vast. And I'm very optimistic about the potential of AI, but I also think we need to be very sanguine about the risks and the realities in terms of energy demands for our communities, child safety, ensuring public trust, as we apply these tools in government. And I think this is going to be an enormous test and an enormous opportunity for everyone in this room, the leaders at the state and local level, because AI will test how we educate our citizens, how we train workers, how those workers achieve dignity in the economy, how we deliver public services, how we wage war as a national security think tank, and also how we maintain our leadership and don't cede it to China. These are not easy questions. These are all really hard questions, but fortunately we have smart leaders like yourselves who are curious and interested in these issues, and we have an expert panel to help us unpack all of that. So I will shut up and I will sit down and we can ask some of these folks what they think about it, but we're looking forward to this conversation.
All right, so just to help us set the stage, sort of following on what I just laid out, where do you, each of you, from your vantage points and the foundation world and business and government and the sort of peaks of American finance, where do you see AI is being most overhyped and most underhyped? John, since you're right here, you have the misfortune of going first.
Misfortune. So good to be with you all. Let's see, overhyped, I do think there's this gap, the gap between what these technologies can do in terms of how quickly and how they're improving so rapidly, but also the organizational changes that are needed to sort of harness those benefits. And so that is true with every technology. It takes years, in some cases, for businesses, enterprises, governments to figure out, okay, we have these capabilities. How do we have to reorganize and do business process reengineering to harness those abilities? And so the whole notion that is overhyped a little bit is that we have these amazing capabilities, them transforming businesses and enterprises and organizations, like in the near future, there's always a little bit of lag there. That's good. That gives us a chance as society and also in dignity of work to kind of think through some of these things. Underhyped, I don't think we fully appreciate yet just what it means to have, if you think of AI as having sort of a pocket of experts, legal expertise, coding expertise, health expertise, and that is coming to your communities. Your nonprofit leaders, your small business leaders who could never really afford expertise because they didn't have the resources to hire a consultant or to hire a lot more sort of PhDs or staff. All of a sudden now, they have experts that are available to them that can help them with their businesses, with their nonprofit missions, with their school, with their education. And that could be potentially pretty transformative, especially to a lot of areas that just don't have access to those experts outside of this.
Great. Todd, please.
Well, I would say one thing that is really neat from JP Morgan Chase's perspective as such a major financial institution that's adopting AI at a high velocity, and we're making it core to who we are and what we do, is that we see AI's impact across all aspects of our business. And when it comes to this overhyped, underhyped question, I think one area to look at is with respect to, there's a lot of talk about impact on the workforce. And there's a lot of very valid concern, particularly among constituents of the folks in this room, about what's this mean for my community? Is AI going to eliminate large numbers of jobs? What's it going to do to our local economy? And I think that one reason that we can and should be optimistic here is for precisely the reasons that John just pointed out. At JP Morgan, we don't foresee a major change in our headcount due to AI because AI can often free people up to do other things, right? And so if we're saving labor over here, we might be able to reallocate it over there. To the extent that AI is going to turbocharge innovation locally in communities that maybe haven't had access to the suite of experts that John was just referring to, you can now you can get started on your business plan and model your cash flow and think about how you're going to go to market if you want to start a new endeavor in a way that may not have been as readily available to you in the past. And one of the really exciting things about that is that it allows us to see on the horizon brand new waves of innovation and entrepreneurship that aren't just limited to the coasts and aren't just limited to the major cities. And so I think that is a great reason for, that is, if anything, underhyped, and a great reason for optimism about the potential for a safe, reliable, trustworthy AI to diffuse its benefits equitably across the country.
Chris, go ahead.
So I'm probably going to echo a few things that you've heard from my fellow panelists, but I do think, yeah, in the overhyped category, I think just go right to the heart of it. I think the concept that AI, at least today in its current form, is a drop-in replacement for human work and human endeavor and human ingenuity, is very much probably a bit overhyped. We use AI. We're very much an AI-first organization in our company in the tech world, and I think there's an increasing. You hear all kinds of stories about AI replacing engineering teams, and I think it's actually just helping our teams do more, which is just creating an even greater backlog of exciting and innovative work that we can undertake. So I think it's really going to be an engine for taking that next step and determining what are those gaps that we could cross that we wouldn't have been able to cross before, is a much more likely outcome. I think underhyped is, again, in a bit of a corollary there. As I'm thinking about public sector work, we work exclusively with public sector agencies, is about how it can help us address one, just sort of mundane, redundant, or low-value work. I think anyone who has spent time fighting Excel sheets for to try to turn them into project reporting, or spend a lot of time, spend hours and hours and hours summarizing legislation just to make sure you capture the key points. I think those are the kinds of things that it can be a tremendous boost in terms of reducing the sort of manual and mundane overhead, and giving people agency to do the higher value work that others have talked about. And I always like to say, letting analysts, whether that's a procurement analyst, a budget analyst, actually do analysis, right, instead of becoming sort of masters of these sort of tools that we've all been using for 20 years. So.
It's great to be with you all today. I think this technology is evolving so quickly with great opportunity and also risk. And particularly in the public sector, in Maryland, we're focused squarely on this just by means of introduction. I'm the Chief Innovation Officer for the state of Maryland. I joined the state a year ago to stand up this new innovation team within Governor Moore's office. And really what we are is a startup within state government focused on how we make government work better for residents, starting with economic mobility and childhood poverty. So what that means is we sit at kind of the intersection of technology, data analysis, human-centered design, strategy, and implementation, working just as a startup would, identifying the problem, rigorously testing solutions, prototyping them, and helping to scale those that work. With that context, I think our team has really been at the forefront of AI adoption and thinking about how we can use AI in solving these problems. And so when I think of the overhype, underhype, I think something that particularly is overhyped is starting with AI as the solution that must be implemented. I think we need to start with what is the problem we are trying to solve, and then look at whether AI is the solution to that problem. I think given and just how present this is in our daily life, very often you hear leaders say, we need more AI tools, and we might need that, and we certainly need to keep pace with the technology, but we need to solve the problems, and we need to use the best tools at our disposal to solve those problems. I think on the underhype front, I would say data hygiene and governance frameworks. The AI is only as good as the data it's pulling from, and we all know this is a perennial challenge in the public sector, making sure you have good data interoperability, the right tools and systems, and so really focusing energy and efforts on that foundational piece. And similarly, making sure that you have the right governance framework, the guardrails in place to know what is an acceptable risk, what is not, what's the process and protocols for deploying AI.
Great, and Francesca, I'll just come back to you on that question. Just so, in the state of Maryland, where are you seeing sort of specific opportunities for applying AI? Where do you see that it is ready for prime time, not ready for prime time? Maybe you can just take another lap on the actual applications at the state level.
Yeah, absolutely. So when we think about how to deploy AI in the state, I think first and foremost, how are we making our public sector leaders more efficient, right? You've heard from some of my colleagues here that many people got into public service to work with constituents or do the task, but they end up spending a lot of their time on the administrative bureaucracy. And now more than ever, our public sector leaders are operating in resource-constrained environments. They're being asked to do more with less. Similarly, our residents are facing this complex, ever-changing landscape, and they want answers quickly. So there is both an external and an internal efficiency deployment perspective. So I'll give you a few examples on each of those on how we're thinking about and deploying this in Maryland. One is for the Maryland Sunbucks program. So this is a really important program that provides support for families to get healthy groceries during the summer months, so to protect against children going hungry. Historically, the Department of Human Services would send out, mailers to the home about the program. So as they were rolling out in this last cycle, what they did is create a chatbot available 24/7 in English and Spanish where families could query it directly to ask questions about application and eligibility. We saw that there were 16,000 unique users on this. It allowed us to deploy over $70 million in critical support, and our internal testing showed that it was 97% accurate. So I think very, very clear use case there. Last week, some might have seen that Maryland just announced this kind of landmark partnership with Anthropic, looking at ways that we are partnering with Anthropic from everything from permitting, streamlining, to benefits delivery. So one of the ways we're going to use it is to help families better apply for things like WIC, SNAP, Medicaid, and also to help them identify benefits that they might not have known they were eligible for. And then from the caseworker perspective, it will help them actually assess and validate those applications and query responses. One use case that our team is working on that we're really excited about is we're building this novel neighborhood development platform to support communities where there is limited fresh food and childcare access. And as we've been digging into the data, what has become clear is that there's so much work that has already happened in communities across the state on these very issues. It's often embedded in these neighborhood development plans. You'll see that they'll say things like, we've wanted a grocery store for 10 years. We don't have enough childcare. And so we thought about how can we use AI to give voice to these community perspectives. And so what we've done is use AI to scrape 200 community development plans, over 18,000 pages of text to be able to pull out resident quotes and resident needs. So if we extrapolate that use case in the public sector in particular, there are so many meeting minutes that could have AI deployed against them, community minutes, in order to really be able to give a voice to communities that haven't always had a seat at the table.
That's great, Francesca. And I think your point about, sometimes it's easy to say, oh, let's just sprinkle AI, fairy dust on everything, but you have to start with the problem, right? AI is a tool, not the solution always. So Chris, I want to bring you in as someone who's actually trying to bring AI into government and sees problems that could be improved. Francesca laid out a few from her perspective, but as someone who's actually providing this from the private sector, where do you see big opportunities for specific applications at the state government level or the local government level?
Yeah, absolutely. So, big emphasis on the idea of AI as being a tool to solve a problem and not the sort of end outcome of the problem-solving process. I'm definitely thinking of a couple of great examples, and to borrow a word from our partners at the U.S. Air Force Research Lab, which is where we actually deployed our first AI, kind of purpose-made AI tool to support a specific workflow. And a word that they use to describe that kind of administrative burden, that sort of underlying task is toil. The sort of toil that people have to go through just to get the job that they're trying to get done. And in their unique case, right, they're employing PhD level scientists developing next generation defensive and warfighting capabilities. But then ultimately they run into everybody's favorite part of the administrative bureaucracy, procurement. And they ultimately are going to need to, purchase materials. They're going to need to, get services. They're going to hire professionals. And when that happens, they actually end up taking people who, their entire life is dedicated towards their research and saying, hey, can you actually help us craft, an excellent statement of work so that we can go procure the tools and capabilities that you need to do your work, right? And it might not surprise anybody, but developing great statements of work for procurement is a class a lot of people missed in their science, progression. And that becomes like a highly time-consuming process, and it's really completely ancillary to the work that, the job that's actually there to be done. So, by their reckoning, a single hour returned to those scientists to do the work that's in front of them is invaluable. In the process of sort of developing a capability for them, we built a model trained on millions of government documents, again finding that high quality source data, also layering in a secure format all of the data that they had used, again kind of getting back to that, like how do you analyze 12 years worth and millions of pages worth of data for key insights, and then bringing a model to bear that can actually do 60, 70, 80% of that job, in a high quality fashion on a single shot, right? So instead of them starting with, what we like to call sort of the blank canvas problem, they're staring at a blank page and all thinking about, what amazing statement of work they're about to write. Instead, giving them a starting point that's highly constructed, highly tailored to the work that they're doing and the work that they need to accomplish, and let them focus on the 30% of refining to make it a higher quality product. And what we learned through that engagement was that, through sort of A/B testing of, starting with that blank page versus starting with that AI tool, actually found that with a sort of blind taste test, if you will, 70% of the people reviewing the AI supported found it to be a higher quality product, found it to be more trustworthy. Again, it doesn't replace that work, but it takes away some of that toil. And ultimately, in some cases, for some of their most complex procurements, they estimated it would save 2 weeks worth of staff time. So again, far beyond those hours returned, and instead returning whole weeks of time back to, again, their primary mission, research, developing these capabilities. So that's one example that I can think of of where these use cases become very real.
Great, thanks, Chris. And Todd and John, I want to bring you in a second, but I think you've touched on a really important point, which is that so much of the anxiety around whether AI is going to take people's jobs or automate the toil out of work, a lot of that can be addressed, in my view, just by making sure that you have leadership and organizational cultures that are pushing people who have been liberated from that toil into higher value applications of their time and intellect, right? And making sure that they have those discrete things that need to work on, where they can spend 80% of their time on the top 10% of issues instead of 80% of their time on all the stuff that can be automated, right? But if they don't have that guidance, then I think that's when people can start to feel disempowered, and you have other issues that people have been concerned about with the advent of AI. So I wanted to bring you in, Todd, because the question about, you're sitting in a different place at JP Morgan, a multinational company where trust is literally the entire business, right? You're in a bank, right? If a bank with, any industry relies on trust, but it definitely matters in banking. How do you guys have been using AI and machine learning for a long time. It's not something that's brand new to you guys. Can you explain how you guys have been integrating AI and applying it in a way that maintains or even strengthens trust? Because that's not something you guys can, cut corners on.
That's right. Thank you. At JP Morgan Chase, we've been using various forms of machine learning and AI technologies for years and years, at least a decade, arguably two. And we use it for things like fraud detection. We use it to better understand whether a transaction is valid or not. We've been able to see how using these tools at the core of our business operations, we've seen our volume of card swipes go like this, and without a concomitant increase in fraudulent activity, because we're more able to stop it on the front end. We use AI to do things like help our customer service agents improve the quality of their interactions, because if you call in and the agent already has, when they get to a real person, already has all of the context of who you are, why you're calling, what the issue is, we can get to a resolution more quickly, and we can leave a customer more satisfied with the interaction. One of the, at the heart of all this are two things. One is that trust is absolutely foundational, and who we are as a bank and what we do fundamentally is measure and monitor and understand and manage risk. And so when policymakers want to talk about AI risks all the time, understandably so, from the local level all the way up to the federal, and they want to know, what does this mean? What does this technology mean? What are the risks unique to this technology? How is automating or using AI going to decrease my risk? Well, that's a conversation we really want to help you have, because we understand risk really well. If it allows us to bring together our unique lens and experiences, because we understand that if customers don't have confidence, if they don't have faith that the technology is reliable, they're not going to adopt. And if they're not adopting, then we're not going to get any of the benefits of this technology. And it's not going to be able to empower folks the way that we want it to. That's on the sort of the foundational side. Then on the operational side, we see, I think the watchword here for this panel might be efficiency, right? We see AI and automated tools as helping make our operations and our workforce more efficient. And that frees people up, whether they're in the private sector like me, or whether they're in the public sector like my colleagues here, to really focus on doing what they do best and why they came into public service. Once upon a time, I was a social worker, and I can only imagine how much more I would have gotten out of my career if I could have had AI help me fill out Medicaid forms and help me communicate with the Department of Social Services, right? So much of my time was not spent on direct client service and helping people. The reason you go into that line of work, and it was spent on paperwork. And so I'm really excited and enthusiastic about the way that we can, in the private sector, bring to bear and offer perspective of the way that we've helped people feel comfortable with AI, both internally and externally, to be a part of those conversations with public sector leaders, like New Deal leaders, as you think about what's the best way for us to operationalize AI, and if we're going to be making any policy around it, what should that look like as well, that's going to enhance the kind of confidence that enables adoption.
Yeah, that's great, Todd. I mean, I think, unfortunately, the reality is a lot of people who have to interact with government at any level have to contend with just a mountain of paperwork and forms and regulations, and people are doing it because they have the right motivations. They have a public service motivation, and to the extent that we can limit the amount of soul-draining experience of filling all of that stuff out so that they can focus on the mission is really important and empowering. And you talked about efficiency a lot, Todd, but John, I want to kind of, you've done some thinking in your different hats about the applications of AI in healthcare and education, and it's more than just efficiency, although I'd be curious to hear what you have to say about that. It's also about how AI may invite us to revisit at a fundamental level how we do some of these things, like deliver education and deliver healthcare. Do you want to talk about some of what you're seeing or thinking about from the Chan Zuckerberg Initiative or AEI?
No, such great points too. I think everyone has a ChatGPT moment where you were able to get it to do a press release or a song, and you're like, that's clever and that's amazing. Your next sort of moment is when you have this realization of oh my gosh, something that took me 2 hours just took me 2 minutes. And if you haven't had that moment yet, that's the time to sort of lean into this. It helps illustrate some of these efficiency issues that we were just illustrating here too. It also begins to unlock on something on the frontier. Totally agree. Not every single problem is an AI problem. But also on the frontier, and it's very early maturity stages right now, but we're talking about a lot of AI chatbots where you text, and that's the primary way you engage with it. There's a lot of experimentation right now with a lot of voice agents. And I was just working with one state that wants to start exploring if it's possible to actually enroll Medicaid beneficiaries with them never having to touch a form. With just an AI chatbot that can actually call them, and it sounds so human-like, but over the telephone, take in all their information and pre-populate the form itself. Very early, it's very early maturity, it's very much on the frontier, but if you just follow the pace of it, that's going to be possible for a lot of government services over the next 5 or 10 years. And so leaning into that moment, that's going to transform, I think, a lot of the ways that we think about health. Same thing on education. Like, I think we're just scratching the surface right now in terms of AI tutors. We have Conmigo from Sal Khan, but a lot of these are text-based. If you look at somewhere that Google's releasing, it's a lot of multimodal, AI that can see and engage with a student, whether they're in third grade or whether they're in college, or whether it's just you or I trying to learn sort of a new issue. But again, it's very different experience than just texting with it. All of a sudden, you can talk to it, it talks back, it can see your textbook, it can see something around you and give you literally a sort of just-in-time tutor. If you want to play with something, just to kind of illustrate just how powerful it is, take something you don't understand. Quantum computing, and just ask ChatGPT or Gemini, explain to me quantum computing. It'll give you kind of a rudimentary example. Then say, explain it to me like I'm a 10-year-old. And it just like, it dumbs it down a little bit more and makes it more accessible. But you really want to see the power of it, say, explain quantum computing using just references from sports or from just music, or just Taylor Swift. You've not lived until you had quantum computing explained using Taylor Swift references. But all of a sudden, it takes these things that are very unreachable. I think whether you're a third grader struggling with fractions, or whether you're an adult trying to understand something that a constituent or new policy issue that's been brought to you. But it's so powerful in terms of what you can just unlock just by asking it, almost as if it's like a tutor for you. Help me understand this, and use different things that you do understand as the bridge into what you don't understand.
Yeah, thanks, John. I think, I'm going to ask one more question, and I want to invite people in the audience if you have questions. Now, we'll have about 10 plus minutes left. Raise your hand, and I think a mic will come find you, and I'll come to you. But your point, John, about, okay, it's imagining an AI model calling you with lifelike voices and talking to your kids as an AI tutor, that all sounds great on the positive sense, but change the lighting a little bit, and it can get concerning for some people, right? Because you have maybe a bank that used to do voice verification to make sure if you're withdrawing your money that it actually is you, but now if an AI can do that, what are the security risks? Are you worried about, kids? There's all this talk about them, having relationships with chatbots, and the mental health issues that we were still contending with from the era of social media. I don't expect you to answer all that question, and I'm actually going to redirect it to Francesca and ask a broader question, which is, as someone thinking about AI adoption at the state level, how do you make sure that you're doing it in a way that people feel like it's done responsibly, with the public interest in mind, where you're maintaining the trust that is a prerequisite for adoption?
Absolutely. This is something we think about all the time, and I think Governor Moore has been a true leader on, starting with an executive order that he issued, having an AI strategic roadmap, and an AI sub-cabinet that's responsible for oversight and tracking progress against this. So Maryland's AI policy is rooted on several key principles: transparency, equity, oversight, and accountability. And the way we approach kind of all AI adoption is on a tiered system. So we have 4 ratings. It's basically a risk system, from minimal risk to unacceptable. In the unacceptable category would be agents that are, operating autonomously, decision-making, with potential real ramifications for residents. At the lowest level, it could be an internal-facing productivity tool, and each of those levels have different levels of responsibility, oversight, and approvals that are required. So that's how we're approaching it. Maryland, like so many states, has been on a multi-year journey. I would say 2024 was really building the foundations, the understanding across the state. 2025, building momentum, and then 2026 is more about that enterprise-wide adoption. You can't crawl before you can walk, before you can run, and so we've been on our journey. Just to close, I think something that's very important too is it has to start from the top. This culture of continuous learning and thoughtful experimentation. I think AI adoption is also fundamentally a human capital challenge, right? And in the public sector in particular, there is a skills gap. And so it's incumbent upon us as public sector leaders to create the right supportive structures, the resources to help people understand the art of the possible and how to use AI. So in Maryland, we've thought about this in a couple ways, and a full Gemini integration. So we have rolled out Gemini to 43,000 state workers. 12,000 of those use it on a regular basis. We have an AI community of practice, so and a coalition of the willing to share best practices. And we have free AI training available to every single Marylander. And then finally, we've actually staffed up a team internal to the state for AI deployment and enablement. So they're there to help guide the deployment, to provide that infrastructure and the technical support.
Great, thanks for that, Francesca. It's encouraging to see such proactive leadership at the state level, because as someone who used to work in the U.S. Senate, I'm not sure we're going to see it at the federal level anytime soon. Any questions from the audience before I keep going? Please, and just introduce yourself briefly.
Yes, Lindsay Doherty, State Senator from Colorado. We had a special session where we focused on healthcare and then AI. We were there for 5 days and nothing happened on AI, so it's coming up again in January. I haven't seen any of those types of bills. My question, though, is on data centers. Because I've heard now that we have 3 competing bills in Colorado coming up. Haven't seen any of them. It's not my area of expertise, but I think the thing that we're most worried about in Colorado is the amount of water that they take, and so I didn't know if you could provide any guidance or anything on that. Thanks.
Well, Senator Doherty, thank you for being here. Thank you for the question. And I'm always happy to talk about AI in the state of Colorado as a follow-up. I think the latest data on water usage are a bit inconclusive, right? So there are some fairly the estimates vary widely in terms of orders of magnitude and in terms of contradictory, right? So from, it's actually not that big because it's reusing water and it's being recycled and the water goes in and then it stays in and it's a closed system and it's fractional, right? And then on the other end, we see these projections that are much larger. My best understanding is that it's not the maximalist case, and it's more the minimalist case. The data are still coming together, and we do expect to see some additional research coming out soon that I think is going to help inform exactly those conversations. In Colorado, obviously, you have some very unique challenges with water and your neighbors in the West, of course. But I'd be happy to continue that conversation and share it with you once we have those numbers together.
Senator, the great question. I'll just a few quick points. One, I used to work for Senator Michael Bennet, so whatever I say and have said is my own view, obviously not his view, but a big fan of the state and its tech leadership generally. I agree with Todd that the best analysis I've seen is that the water issue is a bit overstated, but even small water, marginal water demand, and where you have a Colorado River basin that's constantly strained is meaningful, and don't want to dismiss that. Obviously, the bigger issue is energy, and I think the opportunity for people here is, we're unfortunately in a world where we are moving away from renewables at the federal level, but a strategy that was actually serious about powering America's AI leadership would consider all of the options available, solar, wind, nuclear, as well as natural gas as a bridge, and I think that breakdown in the conversation has been unfortunate and is an opportunity for, I think, leadership from the state and local level. Other questions, folks?
Hi, I'm Seth Clark. I'm the mayor pro tempore of Macon, Georgia, but also wearing another hat, run a conservation nonprofit, and my question is really premised, similarly to the senator from Colorado's. The water consumption in Georgia is a concern, but also just sort of the state government's shielded the review process from municipalities, so we kind of are stuck with these proposals that seem like really smart short-term economic gain for data centers, right? But the environmental site assessments are shielded from us, how the economic stack's going to work, and we're just supposed to trust these developments because the end users have the money to put the land, cobble the land together. And and then on top of that, it seems like the shielding of that's also premised at the federal level, now that the president's saying he's gonna sue us all if we dare ask a question about it, I guess. What are examined? It's hard for us to see in rural parts of the country that are in need of these economic development projects to see the responsibility long-term for our landscapes, both conservation and economic-wise. Also energy consumption with water. I mean, that water question, it's real. It's kind of a cup game, right? It's like if we're increasing our energy capacity And are we increasing energy consumption and creation with non-renewables? I mean, that's happening in Middle Georgia as well, and that takes water to cool those units. And it just seems, I do believe that there's a responsible way to do this. It just doesn't seem like it's happening in Georgia, and was wondering if you guys have examples of responsible data center development across the country, because it would be super helpful in the parts of the country that are sort of feeling like this is just happening to us and not with us.
I think they're great questions. I don't know about the shielding question that you're asking in Georgia. On the community benefit sort of integration, you can look, I mean, Virginia's always been sort of a purple state, and it was like a leader in data systems when it was under a Democratic regime, as well as with the Governor Youngkin, and now turning back over. So you can look at, I think, some of the communities that have wrestled with this. Some of it is energy, some of it is water. I'd say the energy issues seem to be popping up more. And I think it's because of the energy demand, and a lot of residents are really worried about what that's going to do in terms of their electrical grid. Will they have power that's available for them at homes, for their hospitals, for their businesses? Other states, some of the Midwestern states, Texas too, have been sort of wrestling with this as well. I do agree with the other panelists. The water issue, there was one study that seemed to capture the headlines, and that had a math error in it. And the math error correction didn't get the same sort of headlines that the actual initial study did. But I do agree with you. You captured the point that it's all this other energy demand, and whether that's fossil fuels or renewables, that as they consume water, that's the other sort of area that has to be looked at. But I would look at Virginia as like sort of a leader that has wrestled with this across multiple administrations. And I could try to like think through, work with some partners and get you some other responses too.
Great. Any other questions from the audience? Please.
Hi, I'm Dana Barrett. I'm a county commissioner from Fulton County, Georgia. I have a question about sort of the forward-looking financial investment to implement AI in counties or other governments. We're looking at a 5 to 10 year financial outlook right now, and there's been a lot of talk from county management about we're not going to have to, though our population is growing, we're not going to have to add additional staff to address our needs because AI is going to handle it. And yet there's no additional money being considered to invest in AI. So I'm just wondering if you can give some perspective on how we start to get our arms around what that investment's going to look like over the next several years.
Chris, you want to give it a shot?
I'll start and certainly invite others to jump in. But I think that first and foremost, as you're looking for those opportunities to begin to leverage AI, starting with that part of the equation, I do think it's important, again, to not treat it as kind of this, like, it's not a monolith, right? It's not a A-B question of like AI or no AI. It's really about where do you want to apply the tool of AI to address challenges. And some of those things that I'm going to, again, reach into some of my experience from working with teams focused on procurement, working with teams focused on legislative analysis, is really starting with like a really well-formed problem statement about, and it can be about capacity. I think the kind of example I used earlier, very much focused on how do we manage with fewer resources, make more effective, efficient use of the time and resources that we have. So I think if we're holistically looking and searching across the government agencies for those problems, developing those problem statements, I think that those give us opportunities to see if there's targeted investments that can be made in AI that produce outsized gains, right? So if we can make this one process, 20, 30, 40% more efficient, now how can we plan capacity against that in the future, understand, right? Because as in procurement, the complexity is going up on that side of the house from an administrative side. The capacity of those teams is constrained, just as you're forecasting. So I would say it's not there's no one answer, but I think that there's a need to create an infrastructure to understand what kind of work AI can help address and get to a real picture of how that can actually where it's really going to give you those kinds of capacity gains back and where it isn't, so that you can make smart plans about, where you do. Again, I don't think there's any drop-in replacement for, people in this process. I think that's, again, back to my overhyped. I think, I think finding that data and finding that information and finding those use cases and developing strong problem statements and applying a lens of solving the right problem with the right tool is going to help you find out where there's efficiency, where there's not, so that you can make smarter, better plans overall as a team about where to invest in the future.
Just
very quickly, yeah.
Very quickly, I think it needs to be rooted in a strategy. Where are you today, and where do you want to go to design around that? I do think oftentimes you need an investment in at least one full-time employee, if not more, to support the deployment and enablement of AI and to help embed that culture. I think it's also really important to think strategically about partnerships that might be low cost or no cost. In the state of Maryland, I think we've done this effectively on AI. Things from, leveraging publicly available trainings that have been vetted, or working with partners to deploy technologies against shared public good use cases.
Great, thank you so much. Unfortunately, we're out of time, and I think there's so many more questions that I'm sure people had or that I could have posed, and that's a testament to the number of applications and questions and issues that are implicated by AI. And look, I know that the rapid change of the technology and the breadth of its applications can feel overwhelming at times, but I think one way to think about it is I think we're living in one of the most interesting times in human history that, it may sound like hype, and when people say it's akin to the transition to the steam engine or electricity, but I think that's closer to the truth than the most negative prognostications. And so that really only adds urgency to the role of state and local officials like yourselves, who are actually creative and thinking about future-oriented solutions to step up and meet this moment with new ideas. So thanks everybody for being here, and thanks to this panel. If you guys would join me in giving them a round of applause for their expertise.
All right, friends, we are getting there. So I am so thrilled to introduce our final panel of the afternoon, and I want to weave together two threads that we heard throughout the conference that have gotten me thinking about this conversation that I've been really excited to hear. One was where we started yesterday morning with Gretchen Barton, when she was talking about what we all know of kind of how Americans are feeling and how they're feeling about their leaders, and that essentially the crushing weight they have right now is kind of and the fact that no one's coming to help them is a pox on both of our houses. This is not benefiting one political party or the other. They think we all can't get anything done and can't help them. The second thread is this idea that we heard from literally virtually every speaker on every panel, was that we have to deliver results. We've got to get stuff done. And so to me, the question really becomes, how do you do that in this political environment that's so polarized, where the incentives of talking across the aisle or talking to people who don't agree with you is really you're not encouraged to do it, you're punished almost for doing it. So we wanted to end with a conversation about, what we do with that. And then we entitled it, why can't you just get along? So we're gonna have a conversation with a couple people who have had some interesting experiences in this. So the conversation is going to be led by Adar Cohen. Adar is a mediator. He's worked all over the world in Northern Ireland and a number of places. He specializes in, some of you might remember him from Atlanta, and he specializes in having hard conversations and bringing people together across differences. And he's going to be joined by two great New Deal leaders, Natalia Macker from Teton County, Wyoming, and Maxine Debert from Alaska. So I'll bring you guys up and let you get started. Thank you.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for that introduction, Debbie. I have to start by telling you both truly what an honor it is to be up here having this conversation with you both. And now for a second, I need to speak to them. I'd like to ask you to think about a question. I won't ask you to answer it out loud. But in your work as an elected leader, What is the most difficult conversation you can imagine? The one that you need to lead, the one that you need to have, the one that you think about when you think about having it sends a shiver up or down your spine. The kind of conversation that feels like such an intractable deadlock that there isn't really a good path forward. You feel sort of stuck. How many of you could think of a conversation like this? Okay, most everyone, it seems. This is also often a conversation that leaves you feeling more negative about some of your neighbors or colleagues. And if you've thought of one conversation, great. Some of you may have thought of more than one. I'm sitting up here with two remarkable leaders who are finding ways to deliver results to their constituents with their dignity and their values unscathed. And they're doing it thoughtfully, with grace, and with toughness. So I invite you to listen over the next 20 or 30 minutes for the idea that you can bring home with you. Because I guarantee you there are some really valuable ideas up here that you can apply in your own leadership. Commissioner Macker, you were recently elected president of the Wyoming County Commissioners Association. And you were voted into that role by a group that is largely older, male, and Republican. This might be surprising to some. Can you tell us how that came about?
Thank you. It's probably most surprising to them that they did it. So thank you, and thanks everyone for hanging out for this conversation. It's quite an honor to be wrapping up the conference and be with you all. I would say becoming the president of our association was not a goal on my trajectory, but that if I reflect on how I got there, it was 10 years of work. And I think relationship building with people who are different from you and who are making a lot of assumptions about you takes a long time, and you have to be willing to play the long game. If I were going to distill a few of my key takeaways, some that I did intentionally and some that happened by accident because I showed up as myself, for better or worse, everywhere I go, there's a few. So one of them is just that, showing up. I went everywhere. So I live in a very blue county, in the reddest state in the country, I think. And the joke in our state is that Teton County is just 30 minutes away from Wyoming. And a lot of people in my community don't go to other parts of the state and don't have relationships with people in other parts of the state. And one of my mentors told me, you got to get involved in the association and you got to go. So I had the chance to go in my first week of being a commissioner, because of a different board that I was on, to Campbell County, which is where Gillette is. It's a big energy county, and to tour a coal mine and a uranium mine and to hang out with some commissioners there and go to dinner. And I went. Some cool things happened, like in Teton County, everybody drives Subarus. In Campbell County, everybody drives big trucks. I didn't know what it meant to visit a uranium mine and to go out to a mine that is many miles away, and we ran out of gas, got really close to running out of gas on the way there, and had to get gas, and learned that if you can use humor, and in my case often make fun of myself or make fun of my community before someone else does, it disarms them to know that they can relax and be themselves, and that we don't have to take everything so seriously, and we don't have to watch what we say, but we can just be people together. So I think showing up for people, learning about their community, what concerned them, what was keeping them up at night, showed me that it was a lot of the same things. We all wanted our communities to thrive. We want our communities to have good schools, and we had a lot in common. I think the other key takeaway that I took was how simple it is to defy assumptions. And though that was them defying my assumptions, and I think me defying theirs, I have often heard, like, I don't know any Democrats. You're the first Democrat I ever met. To which I say, oh, wow, and you might. You might know some others that didn't know it, and like, oh, like, now you know I'm just a regular person like you. And I think I, out of fear, maybe would have not put myself in rooms with people where I knew I would be the only one, whether that was the only woman or the only not Republican in the room, but being willing to do that, introduce them to the idea that like we're regular people too and you can talk to us. And they often, and still do, pleasantly surprise me that assumptions I would make about them because of headlines I'm reading in the newspaper were also not true. And it has shown me that I am as guilty of some of the same things that I would accuse others of. And I think the last thing, and that's been a theme of this conference, as Debbie mentioned, is being curious. And if we can be curious and ask questions and like genuinely want to know the answers to those questions and see how you can find a point of connection, that will go a long way. Often that point of connection has been, I run a theater and their grandkids do theater. And you can close a bar down talking about theater. And the next time you see someone, that's what you get to talk about. And then the moment comes where you get to talk about a policy idea that they have or you have or something that you need. And they talk to you because you made a connection as a person.
Thank you. Thank you. Representative Dybert, Alaska has a unique power sharing agreement where leaders across parties are working together in a sort of bipartisan coalition. Can you tell us how this is set up and how it works?
Yeah, thank you so much for that question, and it's just an honor to be up here. Thank you to Debbie and to be part of this panel. And just a little bit about me, I have never run for office and ran back in 2022 and ended up flipping my seat from a red seat to a blue seat. And prior to being a legislator, I was a third grade teacher. So I think 22 and a half years of working in the classroom with students has really, I brought that same energy, hopefully, into the legislature. And that's kind of like my philosophy and goal. Alaska is unique. We have ranked choice voting and we have open primaries, and when I was running for office, it was interesting because as Alaskans, we were all kind of learning it, and I had to try to explain it at the door, and you know, it helped me. I had three people in my race, and the top 4 go to the end, and you go to the general election. With that said, what occurred was that it allowed me to knock on a lot of Republican doors, having conversations with folks who are across the aisle from me, and I learned a lot. You know, when I first started, I was like, I don't know if like folks want a teacher or an Indigenous woman or a mom as their leader, because you know, my predecessor was a retired banker. You know, of course he's the politician, and but it ended up working. And when I got to the legislature, because of across the state, I believe ranked choice voting helped candidates kind of meet everyone in the middle. Republicans had to talk to Democrats, I had to talk to Republicans, and when you get to the legislature, it kind of opened up doors. And now we have a Senate and a House that has majorities that have Republicans, Democrats, and independents. And with that being said, in Alaska, one thing I learned is that when I was at the door, a lot of folks said, you know, I'm not either party, I'm nonpartisan, or I'm independent. And I learned there's about roughly 60% of Alaskans that don't belong to a party. So that is unique in itself. So you don't get pressured as much, I guess I should say. And yeah, so I'll go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. Commissioner Macker, I want to come back over to you, and with a framing that in my work as a mediator, the 2 most precious resources to me in my work are connection and trust. I find that even if parties are planets apart on the issue or the issues, that if we've made a connection and if there's some degree of trust, a lot is actually possible. How have you been able to, can you say more about how you've been able to connect? You talked about showing up as yourself and showing up with curiosity. Can you say a little bit more about how you've been able to do that and how over time you've been able to earn the trust of your colleagues who don't agree with you on a lot of policy issues? And if I can add one more rider to the question, what do you know to be true about some of the things that have worked for you that you believe might be applicable, relevant, usable to your colleagues in the room and listening across the country?
Thank you. Thank you for that. I think I can't overemphasize, as I said before, that it takes time. And so being willing to invest that time in the long run. Something, and this may be somewhat more unique to my position as a commissioner and the work that we do that's very county focused, but then we work collectively with the other counties as an extension of the state. And so as I have gotten to know what other counties are facing or what they're dealing with, if they have an issue that literally has nothing to do with my community and isn't going to affect me, I still help them. And I learn about it, and I help them get what they want, so that when the time comes that I have something I need, I hopefully can get their help. So one of the places where this has played out has been in affordable housing. When I became a commissioner 10 years ago, the only place in Wyoming that had an affordable housing issue was Teton County and Jackson Hole, a ski town, very similar to other conversations we've had. Everybody else in the state, that's your issue, it doesn't affect us, you know. The legislature's trying to pass bills preventing us from doing that. They don't care. It's your issue. You deal with it. Flash forward to the pandemic. Other communities have housing issues in Wyoming, and it affects other places. There are still bills that attempt to be passed that specifically target our county around housing or other issues that I think are occurring because they are exploiting an ideological or partisan existence that we're a blue county in a red state when the issue doesn't really have anything to do with that. But I have been able to, through relationships and through our association, get other counties to be like, why are you doing this to them? And to care. And it doesn't have to be because they want to enact the same housing regulations we have in Teton County, but I will fight for your right as a county to decide what your communities want, just like you'll fight for mine. And we can stand together over an issue of local decision-making and local control because we've both taken the time to be educated about that issue in our community and understand why it's important. And so willingness to work on things that you don't have to get credit for, I think builds trust, and that you can get a lot done if you don't need credit for it. And also to work on stuff that is for the greater good of government and showing effective government and that we can get things done. And then, you know, as I guess the adage says, like a common enemy can make friends, and using the opportunities to have perhaps to be on the same side of fighting for something allows some of that trust for people to see that you're not just in it for yourself, but you're in it for your communities, for your state, and you recognize the interconnectedness that we have. And so for other folks in all levels of government, I think working on things and helping people and making those connections and relationships and using whatever political capital you have to strategically support someone else's endeavor allows you to get that favor in the future and have a tangible experience of trust.
Thank you. Representative Dybert, you mentioned earlier that you won the votes of Trump supporters in getting elected, and I'd like you to tell us all how you did that, and to be as specific as you'd like to be, and with an eye toward the strategies or the ideas that could be most relevant to your colleagues here and listening around the country.
A lot of hard work, a lot of knocking on doors. I think, you know, I think I knocked my entire district 3 times my first go around. I think I hit it the 3rd time. And last summer, I couldn't make it to New Deal because I was campaigning very hard. The same opponent went against me, hoping to take the seat back. So I believe I hit my district again 3 times. Yes, it's a lot of hard work, but when I was at the door, people saw that I was committed. I was there, I showed up, I listened, I cared. They saw that I was a real person, And to be honest, my folks who voted for Trump, very hardcore, well, conservative Republicans, the traditional, very conservative Republicans, they would invite me in. I had the best door knocks. They made me cups of coffee. One household, he invited me in, and he made fresh strawberry shortcake. And yeah, he brought me in, and he had his Trump hat on, and but he was like, you know, you care. You're here listening to me, and I really appreciate that. And we talked about his wife and who had recently passed, and so now we have a relationship, and then that's important. And I think that is, you have to door knock. And when you're a blue candidate in a red state, you have to go out there and do the work. And that has resonated. That relationship building has resonated in the legislature. I try really hard. I feel very lucky. Like we have 2 Republicans in our caucus, but I've learned so much from them. My first bill, I remember it 2 years ago, like I used the word, it was to honor retired teachers, trying to get them back in the classroom. But they were like, hold up, you know, don't say the word honor, you need to say incentivize. And I was like, okay. So I learned, you know, like using the right words does matter, even in the legislature. And that is because we caucus together, I learned that. And also you have to go down the hall and knock on folks across the aisle. And one last thing I'd like to end with, in the Alaska legislature on the House floor, they randomly seat us, so you don't know who you're gonna sit by. And I have a delightful new freshman Republican representative from one of the reddest districts in Alaska, and we are good friends. I mean, we laugh on the floor. We love makeup, so we compare mascara and blushes. And she'll send me texts about like, oh, I found this new mascara. And so we found a connection, and she's from a very different district than me. And that's what it is. It's just, you know, I'm human, you're human. Where can we connect to get good policy through?
Right, and that's just it, to get good policy through, to get results. It seems, there's a question for both of you. It seems you both have what I believe to be a superpower, a really important superpower, which is the ability to connect through authenticity, finding the connection. Commissioner Macker, you identified curiosity, which I think is a huge, huge element here. I'm wondering, both of you, how do you always feel curious about people you're meeting? I'm thinking in particular about people who you feel really far apart from on an issue that's important to you, who has maybe said something you don't think of as necessarily kind or true, or has engaged in any kind of actions or speech that you find regrettable. What about when you don't immediately and naturally feel curious? Do you ever have to gin it up? Do you have to find it? And if so, how?
I'll start. Probably. I think I sometimes, maybe in those moments, have to get curious with myself about why I'm not curious, or if it is because of a comment someone made, or the way that they treated me, or their sort of dismissal of an issue. Ask them why that, like, just use that as I'm curious why we're so far apart. It doesn't need to be about me, but why do you think that? As a tool to maybe get my own curiosity flowing. It is exhausting sometimes, and requires some recharge. For me, being at New Deal is that recharge, that I get to be in a room of people that are more like-minded than the rooms that I am often in when I'm in larger groups, and so I can get refilled in that way. But as, I think I'm a naturally curious person, and so I think getting curious about why someone thinks what they think, and what are the places where I can partner with this person. Like, in my case, most of them hold a position of power that I may at some point need to ask them for something. How can I do that so that when they'll open the door for me, don't want to get what I want today in a way that means tomorrow I'll never get it again? And so how do I thread that needle? But it is emotionally, I think, very exhausting. And I think it's also a particularly exhausting trait for women, and that women do a lot of emotional management and emotional navigation in their daily lives and definitely in their professional lives as elected officials. And finding good places to recharge, to then be able to be curious and pick your battles, build your relationships, and like do the tightrope that is being a woman elected official in America.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and try to answer. I guess, you know, just recently, I think back to a couple of weeks ago, I was holding an event and in my town and for my community, and the representative that sits next to me in the district, he is the one next door, and we are very different. And I made myself send him a text to invite him to my event, and just to build that relationship, you know, even though we very much disagree on many things, you have to do that, even though you're like, oh, but those things build relationship. And also in the legislature, one thing, the year I was elected, I was lucky to be elected with like 17 other freshmen. And that first year, we came together and decided to start a freshman caucus. So we were Republicans and Democrats, and we met every week. And we had lunch together, we crafted legislation together, and we grumbled about our leadership together. They're leaving us out, we don't understand anything. And we also had, you know, like former representatives Zoom in and teach us about the uniform rules, about the Mason's Manual, and that caucus really brought us together, and we learned a lot, and I was able to build relationships that way, which helped. We tried to do the sophomore caucus, it just didn't work out. It just, you know, some didn't get reelected, and then we became in the majority, and when you're in the majority, whew, it's a lot of work. So, but those relationships do still carry on. And we also have, in the legislature, you can look it up and Google, we have legislative bowling night, and that is another way to build relationship, where you don't know which team you're gonna be on. You could be, when my first year, they're like, oh, you're on this team, and you're with Republicans and Democrats all on a team, and you're doing bowling. And it's another great way to build bipartisanship that you could bring into the floors. That is another really good, yeah. There's also the smoking caucus and karaoke night and trivia night. Well, the thing is, we all live in Juneau, so you could only fly in. You can't drive there, you can't boat there. You can boat there with a ferry and bring your car in a ferry, but most people fly in, and we're together for 4 months, January through May. And that really, it's very unique in Alaska to have those bipartisanship. You were stuck together.
Forced family fun.
Yes.
How do you both manage pushback from colleagues in your own party who may be concerned about the amount of the time, the contact, the gestures you're making across the aisle? Do you ever hear anything from your own people in your own party, and how do you manage it? What is that like for you?
I'll go ahead and go. Just really quick, I'm looking at the time. Mostly, I would say it's with constituents and groups in my community. Alaska is unique, much like yours. We're a natural resource state, and we have a lot of oil and gas and mines, but we also have climate effects. But I have a lot of people in my community who rely on these jobs, and if it weren't for these jobs, you know, it puts food on the table, it pays the heating bills, so that there's tension. I have to support those. And so, like, describing that to folks who are like none of that. You know, we should be all solar and wind, and it's different in Alaska. So I have more of that, those contentious conversations within my community. But I have a lot of support in my caucus. If that makes sense.
I have a very similar experience. I think part of it is just explaining the government process to people and where we are. I'm unsurprisingly very practical and pragmatic, and I think when people can understand that I share the dream that they're describing, but we're not ready for that dream yet, and that this is a step in that direction, and also use it as an opportunity to invite them to get involved. And you too can be on a board and get to know people elsewhere in the state, and that me as one of your elected officials cannot do all of the work alone. And so if you feel this passionate, let's find a path for you to channel that towards making the change that you're looking for.
Thank you. I want to thank you both again. Let's have a round of applause. Thank you.
Okay, all righty. We've come to it. I always hate this part. Thank you guys so much. Thanks for that conversation. I thought that was, in part, such an important conversation to have, you know, in the context of what we heard over the last 2 days. I mean, we're sitting here with Alyssa Slotkin. The President of the United States is talking about sedition. I mean, and to be able to have these conversations at the state and local level, and maybe from the bottom up, be able to try to change our politics and change the way we talk to each other. So I'm not Pollyannish about the world in which this is happening, but I think it's just important that we continue to try to find those ways to be humanly connected. To go back to what I said to introduce that panel, in a world where we've kind of got everyone thinking we're all crazy. And so I think that I hope that that was valuable for you. But as we wrap up, I was just thinking about, I wrote down a few words that I am going to take away from this, the last 2 days, which I'm always so inspired and grateful to be in these rooms with you. But affordability, authenticity, urgency, results, and hope. I was like a human AI word cloud. That was my word cloud. So I just, really want to thank all of you for being here. I started this remarks yesterday morning. It was only, oh my gosh, saying that this is the room where it happens. This is the room where it happens. I'm going to say it again. I am so personally grateful to all of you for the work that you were doing day in and day out. I was so grateful for Natalia's comment about feeling recharged and that's the space we want this to be for you. We know how hard you work. We know we want to be the place you can come and say, look up for a minute, take a breath, look around, know you're not alone, and take back a network, a sense of hope, a community that's behind you. So New Deal will always be here for you to support the work that you're doing. We want to elevate you and your voices, I keep saying, and your ideas, so please keep sending us those. Call each other before we see you next time. Check in on each other, make sure that you're doing well, because the work you're doing is really, really important. I do want to take 1 second just to thank a few people, because we didn't get to do that earlier, and there's so many people that go into this, and our team is just amazing. I first want to thank our boards and our advisory council, Bruce, Helen Milby, of course, our board chair emeritus, and who continues to be the biggest champion for what we're doing, Andy Burke and Andrew, if they're here, all of our board members, advisory council members, our conference sponsors, and our year-round supporters, as well as our partners and friends. And then I'm going to just shout out our team, so bear with me for a second, but you all have met our team. They are fantastic. So for Natasha, Jonathan, Christian, Andrea, Alex, Esteban, Casey, Andrea, Mario, Isabel, Sam, John, Emily, Caitlin, Phoenix, Corey, Ella, Declan, Dan, Ian, and my co-host Ryan of the podcast. Thank you all. I think I got everybody. And a shout out to Greg and a shout out to Russell and his team as well. So with that, we will have dates for the Idea Summit. We usually like to have them now. We don't have them yet. We will have them soon before the end of the year. So that will be our next gathering in the spring. We hope all of you can make it. Oh, I want to just shout out one other person who's here. Can I shout you out? Janelle Bynum. Can I shout you out? I want to say that Congresswoman Janelle Bynum, New Deal alums, came just to be here with us for a couple hours, and I'm just so grateful and so nice to see you. So anyway, to all of you, just again, a huge, huge thank you for everything you do every day. We're so proud to stand with you, and we will see you in the spring.